So I'd next like to invite up Mr. Scott Thiel, who's the founder and entrepreneur in residence at TOKO. And Scott will tell us a little bit more about what TOKO does. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks very much, Tim. Pleasure to be here, everybody. Thank you very much. Great to be here supporting the BSN, who we've been working with for a couple of years now. So, quick introduction as to myself and TOKO, the business that I founded and am running. So, TOKO is a virtual asset creation engine. And it was created by me and a team of people within the global law firm DLA Piper. I was a partner at DLA Piper for many years and only recently relinquished that role to move over and run the TOKO business as it's now scaling. So I'm now full-time on TOKO. Why is a law firm building a blockchain company is the question I often get asked. And the reason, which is what we imagined probably going back 4 or 5 years now, which is still the reason today, but is even more relevant, is that industry, as we've heard from some of the talks already, industry and enterprise are beginning to look for ways in which distributed ledger technologies can be used to solve problems, inefficiencies, create new markets, create new opportunities. And that is what we envisaged going back 4 years. And now here we are at the cusp, I think, of an explosion in the digitization of rights and interests across the world. We've watched with interest the rise, the various falls and the rises again of things like cryptocurrencies, and then the first generation of asset-linked tokens being NFTs, which we saw over the last 18 months. And what we've been acutely aware of, and again, I think this is where our relationship with BSN is critical, is that many enterprises have legitimately concerns about some of the issues associated with those early distributed ledger tokens, assets. We had the ICO boom, lots of questionable fundraisings. We have had cryptocurrencies and all sorts of negative publicity around that. And if you want to get people nervous, including the general counsel inside a global law firm, you start talking about cryptocurrencies. So it's been an area that is concerning. However, this technology is primed to fundamentally change various aspects of financial services and indeed, the world at large in terms of the way we exist and interact with each other. Richard made some interesting comments in the last speech about trust. That's right. We have experienced a need for trust historically as the evolution of commerce and finance has happened. But that trust has typically resided within the large corporates, and they have their brand and they have their trust, and that's fine. What we've envisaged at TOKO using this technology is the ability to bring trust into transactions in a way that more people can participate. So there is this real focus in our team around empowering value creation, creating opportunities for more people to participate in the financial services ecosystem, to help bank the unbanked, and that's a very simple term, banked. What I'm talking about here is the ability for fundraising, the ability to participate, to invest in things in a way that traditionally people haven't. So that's kind of my opening spiel. So what is TOKO? It is a virtual asset, digital asset creation engine. What we are doing, combined with the global assurance of the law firm, is bringing compliant solutions where we can take assets and rights, and sometimes these are things that we're all familiar with, like ownership of a piece of real estate is something that we're working on. But now we can use this technology to fractionalize those interests. And we can do that in a way that is fully compliant, that complies with, in Hong Kong, for example, the securities regulations or collective investment scheme regulations of the SFC here, for example. This is why it's essential that TOKO has been designed with the legal and compliance framework in mind. So the TOKO engine allows, and we now have a pipeline of very interesting deals, people with large assets who are wanting to say, okay, I want to do fundraising, but instead of a traditional bank mortgage or traditional financing, I'd like to do this more of as a form of crowdsourcing, where I go out to a wider pool of investors who might be interested in a direct connection with or investment in a particular asset. And this is where, for me, it gets very exciting. My real estate partners at DLA Piper said, we've already got fractional real estate REITs. We already have that. I never hear anyone talk with passion about their REIT. But when I ask people, would you like to own the IFC coin? Would you like to walk past that building and look up and go, I own a piece of that? Yeah, now I see people going, yeah, I'll have some of that. It's a trite example, but it's a really important example about what we're trying to do here. But the legal structures and the creation of those assets into these blockchain instruments is really important in terms of making sure that it's done in a compliant way and in a way that provides investor protection and also gives enhance transparency. And again, I've heard some of the speakers this morning talk about the ability of this technology to bring transparency and greater information flow. And again, that's at the core of what we're doing. We can create NFTs. We've done NFTs. We launched at Hong Kong Blockchain Week nearly 2 years ago, and we did what I still think is the most complicated NFT project I've ever seen because we were lawyers and we couldn't help ourselves. So we fractionalized a real-world piece of art. We created individual parts of the painting onto individual 721 Ethereum tokens. We put in distribution of rights to people so that we could all have say over the underlying asset, which still sits in the office of the head of marketing at DLA Piper. But it was a really interesting experiment in how to actually take fractional interest in what was a relatively modest piece of art, but we can do the same things now with billion-dollar pieces of real estate, with $100 million portfolios of intellectual property rights, with hundreds of billions of dollars worth of funds under management, for example. We've just been at the AIMA conference this morning talking about exactly that topic. So that's kind of what we are and what we're doing. Why? Why is around this combination of the intersection of law, compliance, and technology? It is essential that the structuring of these deals is done in a manner which is compliant. The problem, and everyone says, why haven't security tokens taken off yet? The problem is, before you start doing a deal in most parts of the world, you need to spend $100,000 on lawyers trying to work out what is this thing? Is it a security? Is it a commodity? Is it a collective investment scheme? Is it an unregulated utility token? And I disagree with the comments of Julia Long at the AIMA conference this morning, the Deputy President of the SFC. I disagree with her view that there is clarity in Hong Kong. I disagree with the view that there is clarity in markets like the US today. We're working very closely with the regulator in Dubai at the moment, the new Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, who is going to bring clarity to this question. There's going to be a question of, is my digital asset, is my virtual asset regulated? In Dubai, the answer is yes. In Hong Kong, the answer is it depends, and it depends on lots of fuzzy and grey areas. We've got traditional financial services rules in many markets around the world that digital assets are crashing across those boundaries. And today it might look like a utility, tomorrow it looks like an investment, the next day it might look like a governance token, the next day it might look like something again altogether. And we're seeing the ability of people to use this technology to create new and interesting rights, challenging existing legal frameworks. So it's really important when doing these deals that what we bake into them is a compliant and comprehensive and well understood that complies with local laws, because regulators are going to jump on projects that are done wrong. So we are using a combination of technologies, and I really want to dwell on this next slide a little bit because I think the architecture of what we've built with TOKO is highly relevant to, I guess, what the BSN in particular represents. Many enterprises are nervous, and potentially rightfully so, about getting involved in projects with cryptocurrencies or the concerns around unauthorized or illegal fundraising. So compliance is important. Cryptocurrency is big question mark. We have from the outset anticipated that enterprises will want to use blockchain because it is an incredible new form of decentralized computing. People ask me at the highest level, what is blockchain? What is distributed ledger? To me, it's the next iteration of cloud computing. It's just more decentralized, and it's going to provide more flexibility in terms of what can be done and what can be run on it. Now, we've architected a combined public and private chain strategy here. And the reasons for this I'll go into in a little bit of detail. In the context of the private chain, we use Hyperledger Fabric. So it is one of, and I'm sitting next to Julian enjoying my lunch today, and he's telling me Hyperledger is the most used private block permission blockchain. Great. I made a right decision when I chose it 4 years ago as our core engine. Why do we have that? Then the reason we have that is, as you start thinking about enterprise use cases and complex high-value financial deals, you don't want everything to be visible to everybody. There are confidentiality issues. There are data privacy issues. There are concerns about who can see and who can buy these assets. In Hong Kong, if it's a security, you can only sell it to professional investors. Retail investors are not allowed to participate. So you need a control environment in which some of the information and some of the functionality is only accessible to or visible by people who have been permissioned into that environment, hence the use of a private chain environment. However, what we do want to bring is that trust layer. Now, me and a few other companies that run our Hyperledger environment within TOKO, that's trust to a certain extent, but it's not as good as relying on the trust layer of a public, fully distributed blockchain technology. So we mint tokens and then deploy them with reduced information sets onto that public chain layer. Now, as you'll see on the board here, we've already got 4 networks that we've already integrated, so we can mint tokens and deploy them on the Hedera token service. That's the Hedera Hashgraph Layer 1 protocol. We've already integrated Algorand, the ASA standard. Ethereum, obviously, which was the first one we did, and back when we did our first project, Ethereum was really the only choice. And we've got multiple different ERC standards where we can do different types of token standards, each of which have different data fields and different attributes that are therefore relevant to individual types and categories of projects. And then Polygon, for those who don't know, is a layer 2 Ethereum. And again, I noticed in the last talk there was reference to TPS, transactions per second. That is one of 4 or 5 absolutely critical elements of technology performance that need to be taken into account. The one that was on the screen in Richard's talk was around TPS. Can we handle a volume of transactions? And yeah, if your Ethereum main chain cannot, I think it tops out at about 8 or something like that transactions per second. That is not enough, and that's the entire network. That's not just your application. That is the entire network. So there is a real problem with scalability of those proof of work early generation blockchains. Whereas other chains, such as Hedera, is currently throttled at 10,000 per second, but can go up to 100, 150. Different protocols have different speeds. These are important decisions to make when you're deciding about your project. Where am I going to deploy my token? So you've got speed, you've got the issue of scalability, you've then got the issue of trust. Hedera has the best mathematical consensus layer. So you'll see in the middle there, we have the Hedera consensus service. So all of our tokens, regardless of where they get, which protocol they get deployed on, they all run through the HCS service. This is the best consensus service today, based on various independent reports and research and everything else. Another key thing is energy consumption. There's a lot of talk of ESG, and I'll talk to ESG projects, and they will be saying, yeah, we're going to do an ESG project. It's all about saving energy or this or everything else, and we're going to deploy it on Ethereum. I'm like, well, that's not a great choice if you're trying to, consider ESG credentials, because it is a vastly more energy intensive. People have heard Bitcoin uses a lot of energy around, the mining of Bitcoins. Now, Ethereum is going through a merge process where it's moving from a proof of work to a proof of stake, which will make it vastly more energy efficient and yet still vastly more energy consuming than some of these proof of stake protocols such as Hedera and Algorand, for example. So again, energy consumption, green credentials, another really important factor to consider in the decision around this. Now, when we're actually tokenizing assets, and we have some really interesting projects, including large real estate projects here in Hong Kong, we have projects in the US. What we're doing with TOKO is we're taking and fractionalizing individual rights. And we're sitting with asset owners, and I am amazed, truly amazed by the creativity of what is coming out. My background, I'm a technology lawyer. I'm a computer science grad turned technology lawyer, now turned tech entrepreneur. So I don't have a detailed finance background. But when I look at the existing financial services ecosystems and some of the things that you get today, whether it's through fund structures or the way in which they operate, there is actually not that much on offer. We've done an analysis and come up with somewhere between $500 and $700 trillion worth of investable assets today are sitting there unserviced by the financial services system today. That's a lot of investable assets. They just don't fit into the parameters of the existing players within the ecosystem, and therefore they don't get serviced. We see huge amounts of investors, people who are wanting to participate in, who want that IFC coin or whatever their equivalent is that they might be wanting to, that currently aren't allowed to participate again because they're not serviced by the existing financial services ecosystems. The use of DLT technology is going to put us in a position where more people can play as if they were a large corporate. It's what we've seen with all technologies. It sounds amazing that, but actually if you think about it, when I was growing up, I'm old, I used to wait until 6 o'clock or maybe 7 o'clock, depending on what channel it was, to be told the news of the day by a company who ran the television that told me that was what the news of the day was. Not long after that, we could download the news whenever we liked. And now we're all broadcasters. We can all create the news. We can all become, so this is what we saw from the evolution of Web 1 to Web 2. We moved from being able to receive information to being able to create information. What we're seeing with this Web3 technology is the ability to actually become creators of value systems, not just information systems. TOKO enables you to take assets that you have, to fractionalize them, to raise funds against them, and to access a wide pool of investors who might want to participate in that. We're really excited about working with the BSN and other infrastructure providers as well. I think there's a huge opportunity in Hong Kong to be using the BSN rails and the blockchain solutions that they have to facilitate digitized cross-border trade, for example. And this is what Hong Kong is. It is a hard currency jurisdiction at the edge of this enormous economy. And if we can start to use these technologies in a way where assets, whether they're distressed assets or positive assets, whatever they might be, to create a more efficient route to market and fundraising, I think we're in a really interesting location at an interesting point in time, just as the technology is getting going. Conscious of timing, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your attention.